Hello everyone. Today I am going to be doing my top favorite books of 2016. Now, 2016 has been the biggest reading slump of my life, I'm pretty sure. I just have not been reading, which is really unfortunate. I'm slowly getting out of that reading slump, but I don't really have a lot of favorites to show because I haven't been reading a lot. I have 8 books in my favorites list compared to last year's, which had 15. I read 41 books in total, so in the grand scheme of things, it really wasn't a lot, but I am not here to complain about me not reading. I am here to show you my favorite books of 2016. I want a quick mention before I start as well that I'm going to be doing these in an order. So the first book I show is going to be my 8th favorite book of the year, and so on. So the last book I say is going to be my favorite book. The list that I have, though, when it gets higher up, like when it gets to 4th and 3rd and 2nd place, it was really hard for me to rank them. So I did rank these books, but it is ranked very loosely, if that makes sense. So the first book on my list is 4 by Veronica Roth. I was looking through my Goodreads page to see all the books that I read so I could pick out my favorite. And when I saw this book on the list, I'm like, holy crap. It feels like I've read this book so long ago. It felt like I read it last year, but apparently I read it this year. So this one is my 8th favorite. It's going at the end because thinking back on it, I remember while I was reading this that I loved this book. I actually have a review on this book, which I just raved on and on about it, and I remember when I read it, it was just so good, so I had to put it on my list. Going against all the other books that I've read, this one wasn't as good as some of those, but it was still very, very good. The 7th book on my list is King's Rising by C.S. Pact. I really loved this whole trilogy, but King's Rising was my favorite out of the 3 of them. This is the last book as well. This series is an adult series. A prince who is betrayed has to be sent over to the enemy's side prince to be a slave for him. It was funny and it was interesting. It was just so good, and if you have not read it, I highly suggest picking it up. The 6th book on my list is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I love the movie Howl's Moving Castle so much. I rewatched the movie recently and I'm like, I have to read the book. I have to read it because I love the movie so much and I know I'm gonna love the book as well. And while I did really, really love the book, I actually might like the movie a little better, which was kind of surprising for me, but really this book did not disappoint. I thought it brought a lot of new things, and it was very interesting to compare the book to the movie since I watched the movie first. This book is just so magical and just so much fun to read, and I had such a great time reading it. I really took my time and I just kind of took the story in. If you haven't seen the movie Howl's Moving Castle, I don't know what you've been doing, but you need to watch that immediately. But you should also then read the book as well because the book is very, very good. There were some slower parts to the book, that's why it's a little lower on my favorites list, but it was still very, very good, and I highly recommend both the movie and the book. Number 5 on my favorites list goes to Black Butler volumes 6 through 8. I know there are 3 books here, but they are all part of the same arc, so I'm just gonna count them as one manga because it basically is. It's all the same story. I'm gonna try not talking about these so much because I've mentioned in so many of my videos that you're probably getting sick of hearing it, that I am a huge fan of Black Butler the anime, and Book of Circus is so good. The characters are just, they're phenomenal. I can't stress enough how well these were written. I just loved the story. I think it was super interesting. The way the characters were shown, you just wanted to sympathize with them, even if some of them were evil. It was just so good. Like I said, I've talked about these plenty of times, so I really am not gonna go on and on about them. Book of Circus, it's a great story arc. The next book on my list is one that I just recently read, and I'm still very much in love with it, and that is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. It blew me away. I mentioned briefly that when I was going to Florida, I started reading this book, and then when I left Florida, I finished this book, and that memory is just gonna stick with me, and I think that's maybe what made this book even better than it already was, just because I can associate it with going to Florida, and I remember reading it. It had me laughing out loud, and the romance. Baz and Simon. Oh, it's good. It's good stuff. You just need to read it. You need to read it. It was one of those books where I just wanted to pick it up and reread it again. That's how much I loved it, and this was the book that started getting me back out of my reading slump. I waited way too long to go and pick up this book. I wish I picked it up sooner, but I'm glad I read it now. And that was number 4 on my favorites list. Starting with Carry On to these last few books, it was really hard for me to rank them because I really wanted to put this next book in second place, but I just couldn't, so I put it in third, but that is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This book, oh, I ate it up. I ate it up. Oh, it's just, thinking back on it makes me so happy, and I cannot wait for the next book. If you have not read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, you need to pick it up. Even if you read Throne of Glass and you really weren't a fan of that, pick up A Court of Thorns and Roses. Pick up this series because it is so much better than Throne of Glass. I'm not really a huge fan of Throne of Glass, but I love this series. And kind of a fun fact, which I don't know if I've said this or not, but I read A Court of Thorns and Roses before I read Throne of Glass. So maybe that's kind of why I like this series better than Throne of Glass. But A Court of Mist and Fury just gave me literally all the feels. It was sad, emotional, happy, intriguing, like just all the emotions wrapped up into one book. That is this book. I love it, and I also love the Night Court. The Night Court, I wish I could live there. Oh, that would just be the best. I'm joking, that's how good it is. I have like a 30-minute review on this book. I just raved on and on about it, so if you want to hear more about my thoughts, I can leave that down in the description and then you can check it out. Okay, so for my second favorite book of 2016, it's basically a whole series. I'm just gonna hold up the whole series because I really just loved all of it, and if you've been following along in my wrap-ups these past months where I've been in a reading slump, you probably already know what my second favorite books are, because that's the only thing that I read from about June to now, basically. So it's gonna be kind of obvious which are my second favorite books of this whole year, and that is Death Note. All the volumes, just all of Death Note. My dad actually read these books a long time ago, and he's always just like, Alyssa, you should read these, they're good, and I really wasn't into manga at that time, so I'm just like, no, I'm good. Like, I just didn't want to read it. But then when I started to get into my reading slump, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna pick up Death Note. I was kind of in the mood. It was a manga, so it'd be a pretty easy read. And I was hooked the minute I started reading this. The first one was just so good, and the series is so compelling. To be honest, the first 7 mangas were definitely my favorite. I mentioned that volumes 8 through 12, there were some new characters and I really wasn't a fan of them. So that's why I really loved the first 7 volumes, and then the last ones, they were okay, but just as a series in general, it was an amazing series. I don't really know which one's my favorite one, to be honest. That's why I'm just holding up this whole series. But it would probably be one of the 1 through 7 volumes, because after those ones, it kind of got a little slow into the last 2 again. And these just... they're so good. And so here we are, finally, to number 1 of 2016. My number 1 is Morning Star by Pierce Brown. Kind of funny, but my dad also recommended this series to me, so maybe I should listen to him more when he recommends things to me, because apparently I really love all the series that he recommends. But when he recommended me Red Rising, I did not want to read it. I was like, no, it's not for me. I'm not going to do it. I don't know anything about it. But then when I started reading it, I got hooked. Now it's been my favorite series of all time. Pierce Brown is such a great, incredible writer. And this last book, it made me cry many, many times. But it was so good. And it was such a great wrap-up to the trilogy. And I'm very, very excited because next year in August he's coming out with Iron Gold, which is the same world with the same characters, and I am beyond pumped. Maybe next year before Iron Gold comes out, I will reread all of these books because they're just so good. Here are all my favorite books of 2016. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments some of your favorite books that you have read this year. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!